Good morning, everybody. My name is New York State Senator Pete Harckham, proud to represent Peekskill in the 40th Senate District. Joining us today are Senator James Skoufis, Westchester County Legislator Erica Pierce, Maria Idoni, Hudson Valley, Westchester Director of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Marie Considine from NAMI Westchester, Roy and Lucille Ateri from Out of the Darkness, and then from the Assembly we have Assembly Member Stana Levenberg, Assembly Member Chris Ekus, and Assembly Member Jonathan Jacobson, all who represent portions of the Hudson Valley. And we're here today to urge the New York State Bridge Authority at their September 21st board meeting to vote to approve means restrictions to prevent suicides on all of the bridges of the New York State Bridge Authority over the Hudson River from the Bear Mountain Bridge north. Little history. 2 years ago, many of us stood here in the same spot, and I'm grateful that our numbers have grown because there was a tragedy in Legislator Erica Pierce's family on the Bear Mountain Bridge, and she urged us to do something about it. So Senator Skoufis and I introduced legislation that would have required the New York State Bridge Authority to put means restrictions on all of their bridges. In the interim, there have been some positive steps from the Bridge Authority, and we give them credit. They have done an engineering study, so they know the cost to do all of the bridges will range anywhere from $10 million to $60 million, and they have, I believe, 4 different options that they are looking at. They have done public scoping to get public input on what that might look like. The bad news, since the 2 years we've been here, there have been 10 more fatalities related to suicides on New York State Bridge Authority bridges, and if you count the walkway over the Hudson, that's 11. That's 11 missed birthdays, 11 missed family reunions, 11 missed tender moments with loved ones, 11 brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, who are not there to share those times. The reason this is so important is studies show that fencing or means restriction on bridges are 90% effective at deterring suicide. So if you take those 10, 9 of those people, there's a good chance. Thank you, MTA, Metro North. There's a good possibility that 9 of those folks would be alive. To give them time to think, to reconsider, and to get professional help from our mental health professionals, some of whom are here today. Our first responsibility in government is the health and safety of our residents. And that's why we're here today, and that's why we thank the Bridge Authority to their work to date, but it's not complete until we vote to fund means restriction and we begin the construction to get these barriers up. So I thank you all for being here, all of my colleagues, both in government and in the nonprofit world who are here. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Senator James Skoufis.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pete. And really, he's being humble. He's really been the champion on this issue, and it's been a privilege to stand with him and to stand with everyone who's with us today, including the advocates. The simple reality is that for every day, every week, certainly every year, we've seen the last 2 years, what's happened, every moment of time that goes on without these barriers increases the risk, and unfortunately the sad reality is inevitably there are more fatalities associated with these bridges. And just in the past 2 years, as Senator Harckham mentioned, 10, if you count walkway over the Hudson, 11 fatalities since we were last here. We are appreciative of the State Bridge Authority for the meaningful steps that they have taken, and we also acknowledge that this is not a simple matter of just slapping up barriers on every one of these bridges as a solution. There is nuance. Certainly there's a lot that goes into these public works, the type of barrier, type of fence that's going to go up on a bridge like the Bear Mountain Bridge, where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. There are a lot of folks who come up and hike and walk over the bridge. It's going to look differently than a fence, a barrier on the Newburgh Beacon Bridge, where you don't have that same type of activity. So we appreciate the nuance that's involved and the variation that's going to be involved with the fencing on all these bridges. But time is of the essence. And so we're heartened to see finally that on the September 21st agenda, the State Bridge Authority is, we hope, going to be finally moving forward with concrete plans and voting affirmatively to begin the process of installing the fencing on all of its bridges here in the Hudson Valley. We sometimes introduce legislation for a variety of reasons. Yes, of course, we push and we try and pass all the bills that we do introduce in the State Senate and the State Assembly. But even if those bills don't pass, sometimes they can serve another purpose. Sometimes they can motivate, sometimes they can compel, sometimes they bring about public pressure on the agency, state government, local authorities, who are the aim of the bill. And that's what we saw in this case. Yes, the bill has not passed the Senate and the Assembly, but it's not a coincidence that the State Bridge Authority began moving on this issue subsequent to the introduction and the building momentum around this legislation. So again, want to thank my colleague, Senator Harckham, my Assembly colleague, and all the advocates who are here for getting us to this point. And let's see this through starting on September 21st. I want to next introduce someone who is deeply impacted by this issue, and that is Hudson Valley, or rather Westchester legislator Erica Pierce. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Again, I am Westchester County Legislator Erica Pierce. And I stood here 2 years ago, and then the death of my uncle was so wrong, and it had just happened. And I have a written speech today because even though it's been 2 years, when you lose a family member to suicide, the pain, the difficulty in processing it lingers, and I still have a hard time speaking of it. A little over 2 years ago, I received the call that no family member should ever have to receive, and from a stranger no less. A beloved family member had just ended their life on the Bear Mountain Bridge. Since that day 2 years ago, by my count, at least 10 or maybe 11 more families have received this same news. 11 more empty chairs, 11 more broken hearts, and even at least one was a child with an entire life that has now gone unlived. We know from the data that was shared that we could have helped them. Why, again, is mentioned. Because we know from the research that barriers are extremely effective at reducing suicides on bridges. If a suicide can be prevented, in this case by a suicide deterrent barrier, then 90% of those individuals will never try suicide again. Which means that if we had had means deterrent fencing on the 5 bridges managed by the Bridge Authority, those 11 people and my uncle and the dozens of people who came to these bridges before them would overwhelmingly still be with us, living their lives. We also know from the research that when these barriers are installed, the number of suicides at these locations plummet, and without a meaningful uptick in other neighboring locations and methods. So it's a win. It's 2 extremely positive data points which should inform our next actions. And lastly, another data point. We also know that with each new person who jumps, each new news story, there is an even larger chance of someone coming to one of these bridges to die. Which means each and every time we lose someone, the chances of us losing another person increases. So time is truly of the essence. So I ask you today, how many more public safety workers, kayakers, and witnesses who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time have to be traumatized by watching someone jump or having to go out to retrieve their body? How many more families need to receive the call that I did? And how many more children need to miss out on living their life, not finishing high school, not getting the chance to get married, to have children, or in the same for parents who will miss that out for their own children and their spouses' lives? How much more before we say enough? It is already enough. In fact, it is already way too many. And I say this knowing how big that price is, how many ripples each loss has, and how dark the hole is that it leaves when it is just one. So imagine that for all these many victims. To the Bridge Authority, I say the time is now here to stop this madness. You have the power, you have the information. We need your help. We, the families, say, please, save our loved ones. Fund these barriers. Bear Mountain Bridge should be known only as a bridge of beauty and not a bridge of death. And next up, I'd like to introduce Maria Idoni, Hudson Valley, Westchester Area Director of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Thank you.
In comparing all bridge suicide prevention approaches, we know that barriers, signs, telephone hotlines, bridge patrols, and staff trainings, research shows that the most effective form of prevention is the barriers that physically restrict access. Bridge barriers save lives by giving suicidal individuals something they desperately need: time. This includes time for intense suicidal risk to diminish, or time for someone to intervene with the mental health support and resources that they may need. Research also consistently shows that the majority of those averted from a suicide attempt at a bridge do not go on to complete suicide elsewhere or with another method. And overall, suicide deaths often decline throughout the surrounding area after the bridge barriers are in place. In addition, the subsequent reduction in media coverage of suicides by jumping helps remove the allure of bridge locations as suicide magnets and helps to reduce copycat suicides. Research has taught us that during a period of high risk, the safer their environment is, the better chance a suicidal person has of living through that crisis. With all the research that has been done on bridges, we know that we don't need any more research or studies on bridge barriers. We just need the New York State Bridge Authority to install the barriers. I'd like to read a story from a Hudson Valley board member and resident. Her name is Claire Redden. She couldn't be here today. This is why Claire got involved in suicide prevention. This is her story. I'm one of the people these bridges have impacted. In the summer of 2022, out from my morning row, a 19-year-old boy jumped from the Newburgh Beacon Bridge and did not die on impact. The police were land-bound, so I served as the first responder. When I reached the boy in the center of the river, he was 6 inches under the water, no longer trying to swim. Miraculously, his eyes were wide open and we made eye contact through the murky green Hudson water, and he kicked up. He was willing to cling to the tip of my boat, and for 5 minutes we spent alone in the center of the river, waiting for emergency services. We spoke. He kept returning to the refrain, "I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I think I jumped." This event drew my attention to the 6 Hudson Valley bridges. I believe this incident could have been completely avoided had there been preventive fencing in place. A fence would have provided what he needed: time. That day, for the boy, for me, and for all the first responders, could have gone very differently had there been a fence in place. Thank you all. I'd like to introduce Marie Constantine from NAMI next.
Hi, everyone. thank you, Senator Harckham, for hosting this meeting today and for everyone who's here. NAMI Westchester marks Suicide Prevention Awareness Month by honoring the memory of those who lost their struggle with mental health, as well as by supporting, advocating, and educating community members to prevent suicide. NAMI Westchester is the local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we provide help and hope to callers to our helpline through enrollment in our support groups and educational programs, as well as referrals to community-based services. Our NAMI Ending the Silence presentation program for youth and parents and caregivers, as well as school staff and athletic coaches, is an evidence-based suicide prevention program that's no cost to provide. We've worked with government officials to have New York State bridges, including the Mario Cuomo Tappan Zee Bridge, to be lit, which was on September 10th last week, to recognize Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, in memory of those lost and in honor of those determined to live. It will also be lit on October 10th for World Mental Health Day. We raise awareness in this way using the bridges as a messaging tool, as we know that New York State bridges have been used as a method of suicide, and New York State needs to do more. We need the barriers as described today, and we need the commitment of the New York State Bridge Authority to get the barriers and permanent messaging funded and installed without delay. I've personally spoke with suicide attempt survivors who have told me that once they jumped, they immediately regretted it before they even hit the water. So what are the feelings of those who didn't survive? We don't know. So the numbers you heard today, whether it's 10 or 11 who did die by suicide, the number is definitely higher for those who have attempted or those who have considered. We can all work together. We can all be advocates. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce some wonderful advocates, Roy and Lucille Ater.
Hi, I'm Roy. This is my wife, Lucille. We had lost our daughter 6 years ago next week. She died by suicide. Our attempt included trying to jump off a bridge over the Bronx River Parkway. Myself and some passerbyers helped me to get her off the railing. It was a little bit of a shock, but with the help of the New York State Bridge and Tunnel Authority, we would like them to pass this bill, or their advocacy to pass this bill. And it's just also too often that you hear a person jumping off a bridge. Friends of ours, his wife jumped off the then Tappan Zee Bridge into the water, and her day was as if any other day, normal. She had breakfast with her husband. She drove to work, and she called work to say I was not going to be in today, so no flags would be raised. And then later he got a call from the police that they found a woman. Her identification was on her. So that's one instance. We know of two other instances where people have jumped off the bridge. So we would like to see the barriers put up, and again, as soon as possible. As Senator Harckham said, 11 deaths took place in the period of time when this was first presented to now. Those 11 deaths were so important to the families that will miss them and have them in their hearts forever. This proposal being presented today to install barriers on bridge to prevent someone from ending their lives. We hope you will support this very important project to protect our lives and others. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Senator Harckham.
And we'd like to introduce Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg now.
Thank you so much, and I can't
really follow the folks who have lost families, because there's nothing really more to say to people who have lost their loved ones. The only thing that I can really say is that there's nothing more impactful that New York State can do during Suicide Prevention Month than whatever we can to prevent suicides. And knowing that putting these barriers in place, that Bridge Authority has the power to do that, is what we need to advocate for. So here we are asking the Bridge Authority to do the right thing for the families of the Hudson Valley, for the families in New York State, and make sure that people are given that second chance. They're given a chance to have the supports that they need in place from such these wonderful mental health providers that are here with us today, to make sure that they get the help that they need so that they can continue on in their lives with happiness, with love, and with understanding. So I hope that, again, that the Bridge Authority does the right thing. And again, thank you so much to my colleagues in the Senate for the sponsorship, and to my colleagues who are here with me today from the New York State Assembly, and all of the advocates who are working so hard to support those who need mental health supports, which is most of us. Thank you, and let's get this done. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Assemblyman Chris Ickes.
Thank you very much. My name is Assemblymember Chris Ickes, and one of the most important issues that I ran on just this past year was mental health. And of course, you hear a lot of elected officials say the health and safety of our constituents is of utmost importance. Well, I think Senator Harckham and Senator Skoufis, as well as my fellow Assembly members, are not just saying it, we're showing it. It is very important to all of us. When we think of mental health, too often we think of just services that are out there, perhaps, and the types of therapists and so on like that. Well, here's an example where we can truly help mental health individuals, physically help mental health individuals. The story you heard from Claire. Claire actually works for me. She instructs kayaking every Sunday morning for veterans out of Newburgh. And when Claire told me her story, it was unbelievable to hear that this young gentleman who did jump, 19-year-old who did jump, did not even realize he walked out on the bridge, did not realize he climbed over the rail, did not realize that he had jumped. And Claire was there to save him. You need to understand that 80% of the deaths from these types of incidents occur by drowning, because the people that jump either hurt themselves, don't know how to swim, or don't want to swim. And it was lucky that Claire was there. We are not going to be able to stop this issue with putting people in the river constantly. We need these barriers without question. And again, I want to thank everybody who's done the work, and I'm stepping into their footsteps to help them out. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Assemblyman Jonathan Jacobson.
Thank you, Chris. First, I want to say that the stories that we just heard are harrowing, and it shows that suicide affects all, it has no barriers, it doesn't make a difference what your race is, what your economic status is. It affects families throughout our nation. Now, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. But it's not enough. It's not enough to prioritize suicide prevention 1 month out of the year. It's not enough to wear purple. We must take concrete steps every day to reduce these tragic suicides, including the installing of these climb deterrent fencing at all of the bridges run by the New York State Bridge Authority. I'm in the 104th District to the north here, and I represent two of the most busiest bridges. I represent the Newburgh Beacon Bridge and the Mid-Hudson Bridge. most people know as the Poughkeepsie Bridge, and I also represent the walkway on the Hudson. And it just makes no sense that we don't take this activity immediately. So I want to thank Senator Harckham for organizing this event and say that I stand with my colleagues and the advocates so that next year we do not have to come back here and talk about fencing. Thank you.
So at that first, while the train is coming in, thank all of my colleagues in government and thank all of our nonprofit partners and our family members who are here today for all of your advocacy and effort. And again, with one voice, we are urging the Bridge Authority at your September 21st meeting, vote yes on means restrictions. And with that, we'll open it up for questions. Yeah. Excuse me.
The legislation that you introduced would mandate, what would it do exactly?
Yeah, the legislation would mandate that they do this, but we have voluntarily sat on the legislation because a year ago they came to us and said they would look into it, and they voluntarily did the engineering study. They voluntarily have done all this, so we didn't want to be hostile and push legislation through when they were being collaborative.
So then come 9/21, it's a vote on whether...
The Bridge Authority, a New York State authority, is its own local government entity. And so their board needs to vote to expend bond funding in order to pay for this. So this is not something that we can fund out of the New York State budget. It's paid for through the tolls of the Bridge Authority at their bridges. So we have gotten to this place because they have done all of this without our legislation, which is a good thing. But in the interim, we have lost 10 more folks, and so there's the urgency for them to agree to fund. Thank you.
Have you gotten any indication from the Bridge Authority that they are looking to pass this in the coming days? Have you received that?
We have no indication either way. As someone who's been around government a long time, people usually don't put things on agendas to vote them down unless there's a specific reason, and I think that would be particularly cynical in the month that we're in. So we always want to take everyone in good faith, but we are here not taking anything to chance, encouraging them to take the next step and vote yes on authorizing funding.
And if they don't vote, are you going to try to pass more legislation? Do you think that would...
Yeah, if they don't pass it, we obviously will push the legislation starting in January.
More support now than it did before?
Yes. But right now, we hope they'll do the right thing. Yeah.
If they do pass it, what are the next steps?
Well, the next steps are with them. It's the RFP, it's which design they choose, which sequence of bridges they go with. That's an internal process for them. We will certainly be watching, but it's not up to us to micromanage once they go down that route. But generally, they would put out they make a decision as to what the order of bridges they would do, and then they would put out an RFP.
Mark Twain said, "Death is the best friend, the savior of the sick, the tired, the broken of heart."
Hello there.
How are you going to stop people from buying their bocce, go in the bathroom, tape everything up, light their bocce, they go to sleep, they never wake up?
All right, we'll take that offline. All right, we'll take that offline.
This is a free country. I thought we had freedom of speech.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.